Hindavi Swaraj meant for Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, his vision for Hindavi Swaraj, how he went about trying to achieve it, and what it means for us today. What many people do not even think about these days is that when Shivaji Maharaj thought about establishing a Hindavi Swaraj, there was almost nothing left for Hindus in the subcontinent. Most of the subcontinent was under Mughal rule, directly or indirectly, and even those areas which were outside Mughal rule were controlled by the various Deccan sultanates, which were nominally paying tribute to the Mughals. The Hindus had nowhere to go. Their temples could be pulled down anytime. Even when jizya was not really levied, there were n number of other humiliations which were imposed on the Hindus. They did not even have a right to establish their own new temples. So this was the state of the sons of the soil in the era when Shivaji Maharaj thought about establishing a free self-rule territory, a new kingdom for the Hindus, which will not be paying tribute to any non-Hindu power. So where did he start from? He started from a small Jagir in Pune, gifted to him by his father. He starts collecting a motley group of Hindus who were interested in his vision, captures the fort of Torna when he was hardly 16 years of age, goes around, starts invading the territory of Bijapur, captures forts here and there, targets Konkan specifically because he wanted access to the sea so that he can even set up a fledgling navy. He expands his power, and he was not what you can call as completely upfront either about his initial ideas, in the sense that while he and his people knew that he was fighting for Hindavi Swaraj, the way he behaved initially was about utilizing the opportunities, allying with one person against another. So when Aurangzeb was fighting against Bijapur Sultan, when Aurangzeb was not yet the emperor, but was the Mughal governor of Deccan, Shivaji used that time to attack Bijapur territory and capture some forts to expand his influence. And then he sends a letter to Aurangzeb stating that he has conquered these territories for the Mughals, and he wants to get confirmation of the Mughal empire that he can rule these places in peace. So some people may wonder or ask why someone who was so dharmika would try to indulge in certain activities which may be seen as not very truthful. The answer would be that when it comes to establishment of dharma, Kutaniti has to be used when necessary. It is something which was taught by Sri Krishna, which was emulated by Chhatrapati in the time of need. What the Hindus have to remember is that the vision matters the most. It doesn't matter how you are going to achieve the vision, and if certain steps have to be taken for the time being to achieve said vision, it is still okay. The target should be the goal and nothing else. So the vision of Shivaji Maharaj was not merely Hindavi Swaraj in certain districts of Maharashtra, though at the time of his demise, it was mostly some districts of Maharashtra and greater part of southern India due to his conquests. But it was never beyond that, certainly not beyond Vindhya. But his vision was not limited to this territory. He wanted Hindavi Swaraj right from Gandhara, which is Afghanistan, till Setu or Rameshwaram, which was the considered as the southern frontier of India. As they say in Hindi, Ase to Himachala. So he wanted to free the entire Bharatavarsha. That was his vision. And to achieve said vision, he starts building his strength step by step. So initially, he never came out and stated that I am doing this to establish an empire from Himalayas to Kanyakumari. No, he never did it. But every step taken by him was a step towards a free Hindu kingdom, which is exactly how he behaved throughout his career. And his passion to save the Hindus was always seen in every place. Now, just because you're ready to do anything required to achieve your goals, to ally with someone who is not exactly a Dharmika, to get some more territory for the Hindus, it doesn't mean that you actually give up on Hindu causes. Unfortunately, today, some people think that you can make a deal with anything, you can give up anything in the name of apparently achieving some long term goal. That was not the way of Shivaji. When he attacks the Portuguese, one of the major reasons given was that the Portuguese were forcibly converting the Hindus through sword as well as through enticement. So there is a story about Shivaji Maharaj, how he actually captured a Portuguese padre who was converting the Hindus forcibly and put him to death while reconverting those poor Hindus who were forced to leave their parent religion. He was very specific when it came to protecting the Hindu rights, the Hindu causes, and the local Hindus, the Hindu masses, especially protecting Dharma. That is something which has to be always kept in mind. You cannot throw Dharma to the winds in the name of protecting Dharma. We have something called Samanya Dharma and Vishesha Dharma. Samanya Dharma is something which can be superseded by Vishesha Dharma. For example, generally you should not lie, but if you have to lie to protect the life of another innocent person, you can lie. It is Vishesha Dharma. So what Shivaji Maharaj did in his initial stage of conquest, allying with one to conquer other's territory, you can call it as Vishesha Dharma because it was his aim to capture places, territories where Hindus can live in peace. But you cannot give up both the dharmas and adopt adharma, which is what destruction of Hindus would mean, forcible conversion of Hindus would mean, and turning a blind eye towards it in the name of protecting dharma. So this distinction has to be always kept in mind. The next thing he did not stop with merely reconversion of people who were converted, a few days ago or a few weeks ago. When Shivaji was arrested in Agra and he had to escape by tricks, his commander-in-chief, Netaji Palkar, was captured in Agra. He was forced to convert to Islam. For almost a decade, he remained as one of the premier commanders of the Mughal army. Then when this Netaji Palkar, who had been renamed as Muhammad Quli Khan by Aurangzeb, was sent to the Deccan to conquer Shivaji's territories for the Mughal Empire, just like Harihara and Bukka did centuries ago. Netaji Palkar also came back to the side of the Hindus. He wanted to reconvert to Dharma. That was also allowed by Shivaji Maharaj. And not just that, he also ensured that Netaji Palkar was considered as a member of his own caste, the Kayastha Prabhu caste. So there was no fear of losing one's identity Of course, some people might say that caste is not at all good, uh, but then it gives identity for Hindus in their general life, in the sense that every Hindu caste has its own rituals, its own practices, and so if you're going to come back to your uh, dharma, you would want to remain in touch with your own rites and rituals and your practices, which means you will have to be part of the same community again. So Shivaji Maharaj was very specific that he is taken back into the Kayastha caste, and it was done as well. So something has to be kept in mind. Whenever Shivaji worked for the cause of Hindus, he was relentless in his aim that the Hindus are not affected by any of their enemies because of his acts. I'm telling this for a reason. Today, perhaps they have forgotten to think about it. They have forgotten to think about Hindus who live in non-Hindu areas who are subject to terror. In the subcontinent, we have lost large swaths of land in the name of partition. And unfortunately, majority of the Hindus today do not even care about the Hindus who live in those Islamic republics which were cut out of India. So if you look at Shivaji's behavior, you would see that he was actually worried about Hindus of every territory. He was worried about every Hindu. That is something which we have to learn from him. Hindavi Swaraj is not about merely ensuring the respect and self, or rather the self-respect of Hindus in a territory governed by him. It was about regaining all those lands which were Hindu in character earlier, which formed the Punya Bhumi of the Hindus, and to ensure that none of these lands become a problem for Hindu lives anyway. So even when he was being, restricted to a small area in Maharashtra, today's Maharashtra, few districts of Maharashtra, his vision was glorious, and it is that glorious vision which laid the seeds for the Maratha Empire. So much so that when after his demise, when the Mughal emperor had entered Dakhan, had conquered most of the Maratha territories in the present day Maharashtra as well as Karnataka, where the Marathas were literally forced to come to Chenji in Tamil Nadu, transfer their capital there. Even that fort came under siege. At that low point of Maratha power, even then, the Marathas were writing letters about Shivaji's vision to take back Gandhara, to take back Sindh. So this fire which was lit by the Maharaja, by the Chhatrapati who underwent Indrabhishekam, perhaps the first one in several centuries, that fire was the real reason why the Mughal Empire was brought down. And that fire was lit because of his glorious vision. So never underestimate the fact that even to start your work, you should have a very clear vision of what you want. And if you're going to restrict it to a very small territory or a very small set of goals, then you have already lost the plot. Perhaps you're never going to win. So when people might tell today that perhaps a second partition is also okay, I would tell them that it is akin to conceding defeat. And that is not something which the Hindus of the medieval era would have wanted, even when they were being completely under the Mughal control. Whereas we are far more free now with greater power, there is no reason why we should think in such a defeatist manner. The Kootaniti that was used by Shivaji, which many people today are not even aware of, is something which Hindus have to actually learn time and again. He joins hands with the Hindu ministers of Golconda, which was a sultanate at that time, but its ministers were Hindu Brahmins, Akanna and Madanna. He joins hands with these ministers. He makes a pact with the Golconda Sultan that they will enter into a treaty of friendship, and with the support of Golconda's resources and Shivaji's men, they will conquer the territories of the south, especially Bijapur's territories. So he uses Golconda's resources to fund his army, to build weapons for his army. He enters into a campaign, a whirlwind campaign of southern India post his coronation, conquers huge swaths of land. None of these lands were given to Golconda for control. Again, some people might say that perhaps Shivaji was not very true in his dealings. On the other hand, he did keep his friendship with Golconda in the sense that one of the terms was that if Golconda was ever attacked, he would come to its defense. He never denied to provide them assistance on that front, but he was not ready to give any territory to Golconda for a simple reason that had he done it, then there was no point in him conquering those lands to free the Hindus living in those places. As I said, Vishesha Dharma always trumps Samanya Dharma. And that is something which Shivaji knew from the beginning of his career. And he did not stop with merely projecting power in southern India. He tried to project power into the sea. He built his own naval base. He built the initial Maratha Navy. And his naval force had become powerful enough that they were harassing the Mughal Navy. In fact, some ships going to Makkah were also harassed by him, because for him every Mughal naval ship was, ready to be taken. It was, of course, enemy ship, and Aurangzeb was horrified by the fact that his seas were not safe anymore. Where the Portuguese were not very keen to attack the Mughal ships, Shivaji did not spare anyone. He looted Surat twice to raise funds for his empire building. So the aim of Shivaji was not about merely gaining power. His aim was to project power so that he could use that power to protect the Hindus. You have to look at what he had achieved initially. In the 1660s, his territory was hardly 100-150 miles in width. It was not very large, but he was maintaining an army of 50,000 infantry with some 7,000 to 8,000 cavalry apparently, which was very huge for such a small territory. Even that infantry and cavalry could not be maintained or fed with such a territory. So what could be the reason for him in maintaining such a huge force? The idea was that he would use said force to attack the neighboring kingdoms, conquer more places, get more tributes, get more plunder from their treasuries, and use that money for expanding his nascent Hindu empire. Though it was not an empire by size at that time, I call it an empire because of his vision. His vision was always for a Hindu empire. And which is why, with such a small state, he was still ready to spend so much on his military forces, which was not done by others at that time. Surely the Mysore kingdom was capable of doing something similar, but perhaps they did not have the vision that Shivaji had. So it was not a normal Rajatantra. What he did was something extraordinary. That amount of passion to protect and serve the Hindus, to serve Dharma, is something which is required in Hindus of today. So never restrict your vision. And merely having a mission is not enough either. A mission or a vision will be useless unless you're going to take steps toward it. So I can sit at my home and always think of Akhanda Bharata or just talk about it on stages and go away. Not going to help us. We even won a war in 1971, split Pakistan into two. But we as a nation did not really care about the Hindus of East Bengal, which is where they are suffering even now. We had a golden opportunity in 1971 to do something for those poor Hindus. We did not do it. The vision of Shivaji is something which we have lost. We gave away every leverage that we had after 71 for a piece of paper called Shimla Agreement. Whereas Shivaji was ready to utilize every trick in the book to ensure that Hindu interests are protected to the greatest extent possible. Even when he was being defeated by Mirza Raja Jai Singh and he had to surrender, he ensured that some dozen forts remained with him, and he gained Chaut and Sardeshmukhi rights for Bijapur territories. And his aim even then was to ensure that he had some power to ensure that the Hindus can be helped by him, can be protected by him. So what really matters is the vision of Shivaji and what he tried to do to achieve said vision. And something to be noted as well, this vision of Shivaji was retained by the later Maratha rulers. The Peshwas were very keen on conquering the rest of Bharatvarsh. And in every letter written to those who were campaigning in northern India, be it from the Chhatrapati of Satara himself or from the Peshwa in the later era, questions were always asked about Prayag, about Kashi Vishweshwar, Ayodhya, Mathura, the holy sites of Hindus. The Marathas were very keen to recapture those places. Even post Panipat, when Mahaji Scindia re-established Maratha power in northern India, Peshwa Madhavrao was not satisfied with mere power. He asks Mahaji Scindia, as he was called then, Scindia later, that what have the Marathas gained for the Hindus? Have we got at least Prayag or Kashi or Ayodhya? So that was the primary importance given to Hindu places of worship, to their Hindu tirthas, to the rights of Hindus to practice their religion, to live in peace by the Maratha emperors, by their Peshwas, which flows from the vision of Shivaji. And when Scindia re-establishes Maratha power around Delhi, again it was because of Shivaji's vision. Southern India was more wealthier. It was a wealthier place than northern India at that time. And had the Marathas worried only about money, they would have preferred to conquer southern India and retain that power and wealth rather than spend their resources to conquer or reconquer the northern India for Hindus. But they went for the tougher price, a tougher fight, which yielded less resources. simply because of the fact that they wanted to free those Hindu tirthas in northern India. I don't say that everything that was done by the Maratha rulers over their uh, century of rule was perfect. Of course, there were some issues, but the seed which was laid by Shivaji, which was a vision for a Hindu rule across India, at least that was definitely retained by the later rulers as well. And only when personal interests became more important than this vision did the empire suffer towards the end. So, the lesson for Hindus on the coronation day of Shivaji Maharaj would be one, to have a grand vision, never settle for something mediocre. Number two, mere vision is not sufficient. Take steps towards that vision. Try to do what you can. Nothing is impossible under the sun. Because when someone like Shivaji could achieve so much, when everything went against him in that era, there is no reason why Hindus living in India should not be able to help the poor Hindus of today, be it within India or outside India, and ensure that we have something great to be left for our future generations. To lose further territory, to lose one's self respect, to turn a blind eye towards the torture or suffering of fellow Hindus, it is not something which is to be tolerated by any sentient Hindu or a sensible Hindu. I use the word sentient because if you cannot even feel for your fellow Hindu, then you are as good as rock and sand. You're an insentient being. There is no point in even being alive. So learn this from him. He who was taught by Swami Samartha Ramadas, whose very flag was the Bhagwa of Samartha Ramadas, the saffron which stood for sacrifice as well as Hindu Dharma. Both go hand in hand. Yajna and Dharma are always together. That is the way of Hindu life. That is what I learned from Shivaji Maharaj. And I believe we are required to learn as well. Take the case of today's Bengal. The Bengali Hindus have lost about 2/3 of their territory. And even in the remaining territory, they are subjected to pressure in the border districts and perhaps even in some other places. So, what can be the lessons for today's Bengalis from the life of Shivaji Maharaj? As I said, the vision has to be grand. Never stop with merely protecting Kolkata or Birbhum or any particular city or a town. Your idea should be to ensure that Hindus are able to live with dignity and they are able to follow their religious practices throughout their homeland. The homeland being the entire Bengal, not just today's West Bengal, but also Bangladesh, the eastern neighbor of our Indian state today. And this cannot be achieved merely by talking about it. Proper steps have to be taken. And the first step will be to ensure that the Hindu rituals are not affected, that the right to follow your religion is never affected, be it in today's West Bengal or in Bangladesh. Let there not be a situation where we are not allowed to celebrate our festival. Let there not be a situation where our sacred tirthas are not under our control. Let there not be a situation where we are forced to beg others to merely follow our lifestyle, or we are targeted for being Hindus. So in today's West Bengal, we know that there are many places where the old temples and the traditions have been destroyed in the past centuries. It is a good time for us to regain those places, to restart those rituals. Why not simply start in every village a practice of trying to re-establish the proper Hindu rituals, proper traditions related to the Hindu festivals and religion of Bengal, its own unique flavor. That is something which is required because when Shivaji Maharaj started his renaissance in the Maratha territory, it was by building the temple of Mata Bhavani. So the Bengalis, of course, have a great love towards Mata Durga and Kali. And why not the very fact that it is still the land of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose main murti of worship was Krishna and, of course, his other form Rama. And Shivaji Maharaj was also inspired by Samartha Ramadas, who was perhaps the greatest Rama Bhakta of his era. Your dharma cannot be protected without the Deva. The Devas have to be served, they have to be worshipped. Only then you can protect your own dharma. And if you want to really protect your dharma, you have to establish institutions which can talk about dharma, which can spread dharma. How many institutions or organizations have been set up in Bengal today which can propound dharma to the public, to the masses, which can take dharma to the unfortunately uh, communist influenced minds of the youth? This has to be thought upon and worked upon. Of course, we have Ritam now, which is doing a fantastic job in taking the facts to the masses, in trying to open the eyes of the people towards reality. More such work is required. Ritam has to become more popular. More portals like Ritam has to become popular. And it's not just social media, it has to be something on the ground as well. And it should not stop with merely West Bengal either. Or as of now, the situation is so bad that even the Hindu majority districts of West Bengal, you have some problems. And I'm saying it should not be confined merely to the entire districts of West Bengal either. We have to ensure that our Hindu brothers living in Bangladesh are also protected. We surround the state of Bangladesh on three sides. Our government supposedly has a good relationship with them. West Bengal sends 42 MPs to the parliament. Majority of those seats are under the control of Hindus. And Bengali Hindus have some say in other places as well, be in Tripura or Assam. So why can't we create a situation where the Indian government uses its leverage to ensure that the Hindus of Bangladesh are protected? If we really want to become a superpower, the first and very crucial step is to ensure that your people are protected everywhere in the world. They are treated with dignity. And the unfortunate reality is that the Hindus of today's Bangladesh, they voted for India. Their ancestors voted for India in 1946. It is purely because of the nonsensical partition that they have been left out on the other side of the border, and they are suffering for no sin of theirs. So steps have to be taken by us to protect them as well. We have our Tirthasthanas in West Bengal as well as in Bangladesh. Even the religious places of Bangladesh has to be protected. It is not merely the job of a West Bengal Hindu to ensure that he visits those Tirthasthanas in Bangladesh to ensure that they continue, but also to put pressure on the central government to give more importance to the lives of Hindus in the land of our eastern neighbor. What more can be done? Well, any defeatist mentality has to be given up immediately. Even when the situation appears very bad, don't lose hope. Have the cause in mind. Have a clear vision. The vision is to ensure that Dharma survives in the land of Vanga. And that can be done only when the Dharmikas rise up to meet the challenge, which means that you have to take a step outwards to ensure that the goal is always about to be met due to our actions. Had the ancestors of today's Bengalis remained within their houses, Vrajbhumi would have not been brought back to Hinduism. It was done by the Bengali Goswamis of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Tripura and Inner Manipur would not be Hindu majority now if not for the fact that the ancestors of today's Bengalis that they visited these places, brought Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Gaudiya Vaishnavism to these places, and ensured that Dharma is established firmly in the minds of the people. So, what is required is to step out. Sri Aurobindo Ghosh stepped out. Swami Vivekananda stepped out, which is something which is required in today's Bengal as well. Do not think that you can achieve something by merely sitting at home, and don't think that you will achieve nothing by going out. Ensure that your karma is done. Your primary karma is to defend Dharma, to protect Dharma, and to spread Dharma. And that can be done only when you ensure that those who follow Dharma are able to live a life of dignity, that they are able to follow their religion in peace, and they are not being cut to pieces just because of their faith. So think of your great ancestors. Look at the example of Shivaji Maharaj, who rose from nothing but a small jagirdar of a small parcel of land near Pune to the establisher of a Hindu kingdom, which later on flourished to become the Maratha Empire. Look at your own examples of Swami Vivekananda or Aurobindo Ghosh. Learn from them. Give up any kind of fear that you have. Perhaps it is better to give up fear than to live in fear. Better to die without fear than live with fear. Because ultimately, when we continue to live with fear, we will lose everything. Our identity will cease to exist. What is the point in having a life like that? And I'm sure that my dear Bengali brothers would do what is necessary. The most necessary thing being protection of Hindu lives, which has been continuously taken up by the great leaders who have come out of Hindu Bengali community, right from the time of the Pala and Sena kings till the time of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee.